men were killed in farm that are about to be buried. Now 11 are here. Children, 5 children among 11 people killed. And then somebody is misleading the world that it's the Haters Hamas clash. May the fire of God consume people with such philosophies. This is act of terrorism and genocide in this part of the world.
Reports of targeted attacks and mass killings in several communities across northern and central Nigeria have sparked renewed international debate, as advocacy groups accuse the Nigerian government of downplaying what they describe as a genocide against Christian populations. While Nigerian officials insist the violence is tied to land disputes, banditry, and terrorism without religious motivation, global human rights organizations argue that the pattern and scale of the killings suggest something far more systematic. Over the past 5 years, villages in states such as Plateau, Benue, Kaduna, and Taraba have suffered repeated raids carried out by armed groups often referred to as militia herdsmen or unknown gunmen. Survivors recount how attackers moved from house to house at night, targeting farming families, burning homes, and forcing entire communities to flee. Churches, pastors, and religious gatherings have also been listed among the documented targets. The United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, USCIRF, has issued multiple warnings, urging Washington to take a closer look at the situation. Several U.S. senators have pushed for Nigeria to be relisted as a country of particular concern due to what they describe as ongoing, unaddressed religious persecution. However, the Nigerian government maintains that claims of genocide are exaggerated. Officials argue that the conflict stems from farmer-herder tensions intensified by climate change, desertification, and competition for land, not a coordinated campaign against Christians. Presidential spokesmen have repeatedly stated that there is no genocide and no religious war in Nigeria. The denial has frustrated diaspora groups and Christian advocacy organizations abroad, many of whom have been lobbying the U.S. Congress, State Department, and even the United Nations to intervene. The situation is beginning to resemble past international crises where early warnings were dismissed until violence escalated beyond control. Analysts note that the United States may consider intervention for several reasons. 1. Human rights responsibility. The U.S. maintains a long-standing foreign policy stance of intervening, either diplomatically or militarily, when systematic mass killings are proven. 2. Regional security interests. Nigeria is West Africa's largest economy and military force. Instability within its borders could spill over into neighboring countries, affecting trade routes, foreign corporate interests, and counterterrorism operations. 3. Pressure from the American public. The Nigerian Christian community in the U.S. is large and vocal. Churches, organizations, and social movements have begun to organize awareness campaigns, urging lawmakers to do something before it becomes another Rwanda. 4. Strategic influence in Africa. As China grows its presence across the continent, the U.S. may view involvement in Nigeria as a way to maintain geopolitical balance. However, any form of U.S. intervention is complicated. Stepping into Nigeria's internal conflict could strain diplomatic relations, affect oil partnerships, and risk accusations of foreign interference, especially if the Nigerian government continues to deny that religious persecution is taking place. For now, Washington is watching closely. Quiet diplomatic communications are ongoing. Policy analysts say the next few months may determine whether the United States responds with sanctions, peacekeeping support, international investigations, or a stronger approach. The world is waiting to see which narrative will prevail, a nation battling insecurity, or a genocide being ignored in plain sight. While the Nigerian government continues to insist that the violence across Christian communities is merely a security challenge, voices from the ground tell a different story, one filled with survivors' testimonies, destroyed farmlands, displaced families, and villages wiped off the map. In Plateau State, the mountains that once echoed with children's laughter now ring with the silence of communities abandoned overnight. Charred roofs, broken walls, and empty farmlands stand like tombstones for the lives once lived there. A mother, who asked to be identified only as Nkiru, described how attackers came into her village at 2:41 a.m. "We heard footsteps. Then shouting. Then gunshots. I ran with my children, but my husband couldn't run. He went back to help his brother. They shot him. They burned his body." Similar accounts repeat across Kaduna, Benue, Taraba, and Zamfara. Many of these villages are predominantly Christian farming communities with long-established roots. Yet, official statements from Abuja maintain the incidents are merely clashes with bandits. However, several patterns raise international alarm. The attacks are often strategic and coordinated, not random. They occur mainly at night, when resistance is weakest. Churches, priests, and community leaders are frequently the first targets. The attackers often occupy the land afterward, leaving survivors homeless. These patterns have fueled claims of systematic religious cleansing, even if no government body in Nigeria has yet used that term. Increasing pressure in Washington. Within the halls of the U.S. Capitol, the issue is beginning to gain traction. Nigeria is home to one of the largest Christian populations in Africa, and many Americans share deep cultural and religious ties with Nigerian Christian communities. Recently, during a congressional briefing, Senator Royce H. Mitchell stated, "When we hear the word genocide, we do not wait for the death count to reach 1 million. We act." The question now is, why is Nigeria not being treated with the same urgency as other crisis regions? This statement has sparked debates in the U.S. State Department, where officials are reportedly divided. One group believes the situation must be confronted now before escalation. Another group worries that involvement will strain military cooperation with Nigeria, a key partner in regional counterterrorism operations. But the pressure is no longer coming from policymakers alone. The role of international media and social platforms. What the Nigerian government calls exaggeration, activists call evidence. Drone footage of burned villages. Testimonies from displaced families. Documented patterns of attacks. Reports from local religious councils. These have begun circulating on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, and diaspora WhatsApp networks. The conversation is no longer controlled. Influential church groups in the U.S. have started organizing national prayer rallies and media campaigns under slogans such as, "Nigeria will not become another Rwanda. Stop the silent killing. Christians are not targets." These campaigns are already shaping public awareness, and public awareness shapes government pressure. Why the U.S. might step in. If the U.S. chooses to intervene, it may not start with troops. Intervention can take many forms. Sanctions on Nigerian officials accused of negligence. Travel bans on politicians believed to be enabling attackers. Humanitarian aid missions to internally displaced persons, IDP, camps. Intelligence sharing operations to track armed militias. United Nations Security Council motions demanding investigations. These diplomatic moves are often the first stage before stronger measures. However, even the possibility of U.S. involvement has begun to spark quiet tension inside Nigeria's political landscape. Some officials are concerned such scrutiny could expose networks of corruption, security failures, and silence from those who should have spoken. But the killings have not stopped. Just last week, another Christian farming settlement in Kaduna's Kajuru local government area was attacked. 10 people were killed. Homes were burned. Survivors fled into the bush. Yet again, the incident was described officially as bandit activity. Meanwhile, in Washington, new documents and testimonies continue to arrive. Diplomatic observers say a shift is happening, slowly but unmistakably. The question is no longer whether the world is watching. The question is now, what happens when the silence finally breaks? Imagine this, and say it out loud, as if the microphone is the only witness left. I woke to the sound of my neighbor crying, not the soft low cry of someone mourning a life already ended, but the raw, animal sound of a person whose whole world had been blown apart in a single night. I walked outside and the road I had walked every morning for 20 years was a map of soot and broken glass. Houses I could name by the patterns of their roofs were nothing but blackened bones. In the distance, a church steeple, the place where my father taught me to stand when the rain came, leaned like a wounded man. If you ask me when hope left, I will tell you, it left the night the sky burned. The night the names of our children became numbers whispered at midnight. The night we learned to check every truck that passed, to count the family members at dawn, to hold our breath when the moon rose because the moon had begun to mean danger. They tell us to be patient. They tell us the situation is complex. They tell us there is no genocide. But I have seen what patience does when bullets answer your prayers. Patience buries the living while the world debates the definition of our deaths. Complexity becomes a coat to hide cowardice. Denial is a door slammed in the face of a bleeding nation. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the small things, a mother humming to soothe a baby who will never wake again, a son who learned to fix radios now tracing the place where his hand was burned, an old woman who keeps the neighbor's photographs as if touch could stitch back the faces. Imagine gathering what you can carry in the dark because there is no electricity, only a pale, terrible light from distant fires, and you place your life in a plastic bag. Imagine the slow, terrible arithmetic of loss. One plate fewer at dinner, one shoe abandoned on a road, one voice that will not answer the next time you call a name. We are told the killings are not about religion alone, perhaps they are not. But what does that truth mean when those killed were tending their farms and lighting candles in their churches and listening to lullabies at night? What solace is semantics to a widow whose husband is not coming home? What comfort is an academic debate to children who now sleep two to a bed, with strangers who smell of smoke and fear? You may ask, why speak like this now? Because silence is a weapon as sharp as any rifle. Because to name the pain is a kind of resistance. Because the world must learn to hear people before they become lines in a report. If the government denies, then the denied still breathe, still hunger, still carry the charred bundles of their lives. If the institutions look away, who will count our dead? If power calls our suffering complexity, who will carry the children through the night? Think about the sound of a village at dawn after an attack, an ache that is not only in the body but in the rhythm of the place. Chickens do not crow. The wells seem to hold fear instead of water. The old men stare at horizons where nothing will return but the smell of smoke. And in that silence, mothers stitch and unstitch blankets because there is little to do but try to keep warm the children who do not yet understand that their world has been stolen. We do not ask for pity. We ask for acknowledgement. We ask that our names be remembered as more than footnotes. We ask that when leaders speak of sovereignty and complexity, they do not use those words as shields to hide the fact that people are burned out of their homes, that churches and schools lie in ruins, that graves multiply. A denial on paper cannot close the wounds that the earth keeps. Imagine standing on a road with nothing but a plastic bag and the shirt on your back, watching soldiers of no uniform pass, strangers who will not say a name you know, while the government says nothing, or says there is nothing to say. Imagine making the long walk to a camp where aid arrives in trickles and compassion comes in hashtags. Imagine the unbearable dignity of asking a neighbor for salt because you cannot afford the food sold in the market. Imagine the humiliation of being forced to be grateful for a temporary shelter that feels like an apology for the life you lost. Ask yourself this: when the world insists on debates about how to label our pain, what happens to the people inside the debate? Do we cease to be human the moment someone else disputes our story? If politics demands evidence, let the evidence be our missing, the empty chairs at our tables, the lullabies that stopped halfway through. If diplomacy must be careful, then let it be careful not to become the language of leaving. And to those who would speak of intervention, whether words, aid, or the threat of more, hear this plea: do not make us a battleground for your abstractions. If you act, act with the humility to listen first. If you speak, let your voice be guided by the people who still wake to count the living. Do not let rhetoric replace rescue. Do not let declarations be substitutes for safe corridors, for shelters with clean water, for justice that reaches into the places where wrongs are done and names the perpetrators. I am not asking you to solve the whole world. I am only asking you to see us. To make room for our grief not as a chapter in some distant policy paper but as a human cry that demands response. To ensure that when the history books are written, they do not begin with denial. If you cannot come to our villages, at least let your government stop a language that makes our deaths acceptable. If you will not send soldiers, send doctors and secure aid convoys. If you will not impose sanctions, at least open your hearts to the refugees who carry our songs and our last photographs. If labels are what the powerful need to act, then label our suffering with enough seriousness that it brings help, not more debate. Listen to me, tears are not evidence to be weighed, they are testimony. Hunger is not an argument, it is a fact. The silence of those who should protect us cannot be explained away by clever phrases. When a government denies, somebody pays with blood. When a nation's leaders say there is no genocide, that denial is felt in the thickness of the air where mothers breathe and pray for simple safety. So I tell this story, not to inflame, not to divide, not to tell a folktale, but to offer an honest portrait of living under fear. Imagine being a victim of massacre, and imagine being told nothing is happening. Imagine the indignity of both wounds and erasure. Imagine, then, how loud your heart would beat when you hear that the rest of the world is discussing labels instead of holding your hand. If you have ever called someone and they did not answer, you will know a piece of this. If you have ever waited for a bus that never came, you will know a piece. If you have ever sat with a child through the night and pretended to sleep so they would not be afraid, you will know a piece. But there are parts of our pain that do not fit your memory, they are sharper, they are older, they are stitched into the land itself. Remember us not because of what labels you give our suffering, but because of the faces you might see in the morning news. Remember us because there are children who will grow up knowing the exact sound of a distant engine and assuming the worst. Remember us because denial cannot raise a child nor feed a widow nor rebuild a home. I end where I began, with a mother who counts empty beds and a father who hums a lullaby for a son who will not hear it again. If words have power, then lend us your words. If silence has cost us everything, let your voice be the place where our story is finally told. Subscribe to Daily Topics TV for more eye-opening stories like this. Don't forget to like, share and comment.